everyone. Welcome to a tangible nostalgia book review. Today we are talking about a book called The Black Jacobins, Toussaint Overture, and the San Domingo Revolution. This book was published in 1938 by C.L.R. James, and it's about the Haitian Revolution. In full disclosure, I picked up this book because I thought it was about the Jacobite Revolution in Scotland, and I thought, I didn't realize there were a lot of Black people in Scotland in the 18th century. And I started reading it and realized how wrong I was, and I was pleasantly surprised. So the Haitian Revolution occurred during the Age of Revolution, the French Revolution, the American Revolution. It took place between 1791 and 1804, and one of the things I find interesting about this period is how the ideas of democracy and freedom for every man literally permeated the whole world and created all this social upheaval. Sorry, you can see my dog. And it was true in Haiti. And so in Haiti, slavery was awful. It was awful everywhere, but in Haiti, slaves were treated especially bad. There were all these specific stories about terrible things they did to slaves, such as burying them alive and putting gunk on their face so that bugs would eat their face, like terrible stuff. And so, of course, there was reason to revolt. And one of the other issues that he brought up in the beginning was the mulatto population. So that is mix of black and white blood, and so there was this growing population of mulattoes, and they were uncertain as to what status those people got. Are they black? Are they white? Are they slaves? Can they own slaves? That sort of thing. The general rule was that they would resort to their blackest parent. So if they had a blacker parent, they would be in that social class. I thought this was a pretty leading analysis be written in the 1930s. That was one of the reasons why I liked this book so much. And so it was also about this man named Toussaint. Excuse my French pronunciation, it's horrible. So he was born a slave, but he was kind of a privileged slave in that he was a house slave who managed the affairs of his master, and he was able to get an education. So that really put him ahead of the game when the revolution happened, because he was educated and he was already able to lead. So he quickly became a leader once the French Revolution happened and the slaves started revolting in Haiti, back kind of riding these ideas of democracy and freedom for every man. And Toussaint was a really good leader. He was dynamic. He would travel all over the island to visit people personally, and he would listen to them personally. And he wasn't overly cruel, which was not true of everybody at the time. So after Napoleon won, he decided that he didn't actually want to end slavery of black people because there was a lot of money in it. So he sent a governor and an army to come bring slavery back to the island, because the slavery revolt was so successful that they had abolished slavery in the island. And so he sent this group of soldiers to come reinstate slavery. But people who were used to leading themselves weren't going to take that. So they continued fighting, creating the Civil War in Haiti, and Toussaint was a big leader in that. He was eventually sent back to France, and that's where he died. So that Napoleon was told, if you just take out this leader, the revolt would be done, but that wasn't true. His legacy lived on so much that they continued to revolt after he had already died in a French prison. And eventually, they won. They abolished slavery in Haiti for good. And I found this a really inspirational story. And towards the end, there were a number of stories about black people who were executed for their role in the rebellion. One of them was about 3 teenagers who were being burned at the stake. And one of them turned to look at his executioner, and he said, "You don't know how to die. This is how you die." And he wiggled in his bindings and put himself in the fire quicker than it would have reached him, and just stared at the executioner while he burned. Another time, there was a woman who told the woman next to her about to be executed, "At least your daughters won't be born into slavery." And I mean, these are horrible stories, but they're so inspirational because they show that people were fighting for this greater purpose of having free children. So they had this hope that even though they were experiencing hardship and turmoil during their lifetime, their children would be free. And that is just so inspirational. It's amazing when I read this book to think that it was written in 1939, and yet here I was reading it in current day, and it still spoke so clearly to present race struggles. I mean, the fact that he was addressing race so clearly, but also in such a way that it didn't simplify the situation. He talked about the plight of the colonists and what their taxes were doing to them, what motivated them, and it showed a clear picture of this complex narrative of what happened during this time. But it was so well written. I mean, even phrasing it with Toussaint as the hero, and but not an unproblematic hero. He didn't shy away from some of his faults, but it was just so well written, especially for being an academic book that was so well researched. You don't always get both. So I would highly recommend this book, especially if you're interested in slavery, if you're interested in American history and South American history and the French Revolution and colonialism and Marxism and uprisings and Black history. Basically, it has pretty mass appeal. So, I really enjoyed it. And it's really highly rated all over the place. And I think that's for a reason. I think that we're still talking about it now for a reason, because it was so groundbreaking in the history of Haiti and the history of the Haitian Rebellion. It's still known as the most important work to read for the Haitian Rebellion. So yeah, I would really recommend it. It was a good read. Thank you for listening. There is a link in the show note if you want to read more about the book and check it out for yourself. If you want more history book recommendations and more history tidbits and thoughts, please subscribe. I will see you later. Bye.